Welcome to another podcast. Here we're going to consider memory and how memory affects anxiety, stress, panic and trauma, and to further look at phobias and paranoia with regards to memory. When we think of memory, we tend to think of a memory of a scene, maybe along a beach, or a memory of someone that we haven't seen for a long time or that is no longer with us. We tend to think of memory in a kind of romantic light. A memory, it's just a memory. But there's so much more to the process of memory in the human mind that relate to anxiety, stress, trauma, or simply frustration. When we see with our eyes, smell with our nose, hear, taste and touch, importantly we touch things. These are called sensory inputs, our senses. So if I see you or this plastic flower, I'm seeing it and it is being received by me as sensory information. A bit closer to you. If I taste something, for example, if I close my eyes and I taste prawns or mint, I have a memory of how it tastes, but importantly, taste is a sensory, something we sense, and these are called sensory inputs. All sensory inputs go into are received by us in a certain part of our brain. And when I say our brain, I mean, what makes up my head. So there are specific regions within our brains which deal with memories and memory. And as I've just said, it's critical to be aware of how our mind works at a basic level, so we can be in ways to break down and break away from anxiety and trauma and general panic, possibly in relation to things we see, people we meet, or events that we keep on recalling in our mind, which cause, for example, post-traumatic stress or recycled anxiety over someone or something, or even, nothing. So our senses in our body, we live in a world, we don't live in a vacuum, and we receive sensory information. Our five senses receive sensory information. It goes to a part of the brain called the thalamus. The thalamus, you may wonder, okay, well, the human head is divided into regions. Structurally we have regions. They're called lobes, which basically means a rounded area from Latin. So we have the front part of our brain is called the frontal lobe, and then after the frontal lobe, going quite far back here, it's called the parietal lobe, and the back area is called the occipital lobe. Now, underneath, between my temples, is the temporal lobe. So think of it as a region, if you like, because I understand that the word lobe, we tend maybe to think of an earlobe. So we'll talk about these parts of the brain called regions. Now each region performs a specific role in memory. But when I see the flower, or a dog or an apple, it doesn't matter, that sensory information is going through to my temporal lobe, which is between my two temples all the way through, and an area called the thalamus. And the thalamus processes this sensory input, this sensory information. It's like a hub or a processing center. You may even want to think of it as a processing chip, a microchip, but it processes that sensory information. And from there, it then distributes this visual imagery. Now, it then is directly, routed through to the part of the brain above this thalamus called the hippocampus. Be careful there. The hippocampus, which means seahorse in Latin, is responsible for what's called short-term memory. So if I look at you and ignore the flower, can recall I had a flower in my hand, I was using it to explain the idea of us seeing things, I remember that it was blue. All this is latent memory in our what's called our short-term memory in the hippocampus. It's a part of the brain. Please remember these terms. There are not many, there are 5. If you can remember these, it would be brilliant. It would really help you understand how your memory is working in relation to anxiety, trauma, and phobias and paranoia. So we have a short-term memory, things that happen recently, very recently to us, usually within a day. Short-term memory refers to things we've seen and experienced within the lapse of a day, an episode of a day. Now, when we go to sleep at night, there is a transfer of memory from our short-term memory, and the hippocampus transfers it into long-term memory. It's converted into long-term memory, which as we sleep, it's like discharged from the short-term memory section into the long-term element. There's a technical word called engram, but it is fixed within your brain. A lot of wind, there's going to be background noise, because all of my podcasts have birds, chickens, fire engines, police, airplanes. I can't escape the noise. So we have short-term and long-term memory. Now, how that memory is stored, as I said, as for the long term. Now, the hippocampus, this area, is also responsible for the memory of spatial awareness. We remember, how to orientate things in space and navigate to certain places. You're in your car or you're walking and you want to go to a shop to buy something. So you know in your mind where the shop is, because it's in your long-term memory or medium-term memory, and you can remember without really looking at a map where the shop is. Remember how to get to the shop, and or by walking or by car, it doesn't really matter, but you remember where. So the hippocampus, this part in your brain which looks like a seahorse, is responsible for your ability to remember where things are, to navigate to them, and also to do with when you receive this sensory information from your thalamus, it then modulates it into either being short-term memory and long-term memory. Now, a lot of things we experience in our day-to-day lives, we don't really want to recall, or we don't need to recall, or we're not going to recall. So not everything is stored deeply into our long consciousness. So, in terms of a stressful event, something that causes us to react. Now, when we think of trauma, we tend to think of being involved in a car accident, a woman giving birth, like badly giving birth with birth pain. We may talk about seeing someone dead, a dead person, losing someone that we've loved, being in a war, constantly fighting and conflicting and confronting somebody in our lives, perhaps, can call a deeper trauma. So every time, a memory necessarily is a single event. A memory, when it repeats every night, tends to go deep into our unconscious mind. And from there, the brain is trying to put it in the unconscious longer term memory so that we can do things automatically. It's not there for the bad, it's for the good. So we are storing these memories. For example, probably not, but when you learn how to ride a bicycle, you learn and then you learn. You don't need to learn every time. Then it becomes automatically, or to play good tennis or to play whatever you want. These things develop automatically, and then we become familiar with things, and our body learns how to do things. It's using a longer term memory rather than a short term immediate memory, which is associated with our a day, or what we immediately sense we receive. Okay, so this is the problem. The problem is that if an event is traumatic, or it repeats, there's a repeated conflict with somebody, there's a repeated stress, anxiety over something repeats on a day in, day out, or over a period of time, or over physically severe time, the thalamus, the control center, sends a signal to the thing called the amygdala. Amygdala, or amygda in Italian, means walnut, like a nut, a walnut. Okay, so there's another part of our memory, a part of our brain involved with memory. The amygdala is where we engage with anxiety, fear, and stress. And that puts a marker on the memory to say, watch out, be careful, back off, don't engage in it, or... So, if this represents a nerve, in your thalamus, it then puts a red marker on that memory to be aware, to watch out, to be careful, or it's just repeated stress, you don't want to be there, you don't want to be with this person, you don't want to be near something, you want to mark it. It embeds itself in your subconscious. So anything that is traumatic deeply, a signal that goes from the thalamus to the amygdala. The amygdala triggers it and marks it to be careful, to watch out. It then goes in the hippocampus in our short-term memory, and every time it repeats and repeats, or it's severe, it falls into our unconscious mind. So I've talked about three parts of our brain. Talked about to do with memory. All of these parts that deal with memory are in something primarily called the temporal lobe, which is between that temple and that temple. And within there we have the thalamus, which receives all this sensory input from taste, sight, touch, and hearing, but not smell. Olfactory is another thing, but don't worry about that. And then you have the hippocampus, which is there for processing short-term memory and long-term memories, and also enabled us to navigate, such as to go to the shops, spatial memory and temporal memory. Spatial memory and maybe navigation, the ability to get somewhere. but it's marked by the amygdala, which is in this same part of the temporal lobe, which then marks that nerve with a marker which causes you to watch out and to become in a state of anxiety, or it means to be careful, which is a semi-anxious state. Okay, so why have I talked about this being a nerve and it's been marked with a red mark? It's because our brain and our spine is called our nervous system, and our brain is a neural network. All our brain is, but inside, is a nervous network, a network of nervous energy. So memory is channeled through neural networks, through nerves. It's nerves that are reacting. It's all electrical signals that go through the nerves, the axons and the dendrites, so of a nerve. So everything that goes on in your brain is actually through electrical circuit, primarily to do with nerves. So before going on to ways and means to try to break trauma cycles, reliving a memory, reliving a bad memory, feeling anxious about certain people or in certain situations or with certain objects. Let's look at a few other parts of your brain which to do with memory. I'll make an easy one. Is that before going on to one of the most important parts, is that in the back of your mind, remember, you've got the occipital lobe. You may well know that deals with your visual, what you visually see, your visual. So, for example, for me to see my beat counter, I'm seeing it. That information is relaying through the optic nerve to my back of my brain, and that's being rerouted to the thalamus, which is the control center of all the information, where I can process what's going on by visually seeing this beat counter. Now, as it happens, I'm not going to react to seeing that because I don't need that particular didactic tool in this podcast, but you see it's all interconnected. So the back of our mind is also responsible for visualizations. So if I'm going to say to you, imagine a bird sitting on a nest. Okay, try to visualize that. Or imagine a boat on a lake. Imagine yourself buying a cup of coffee. It doesn't matter what it is, but you can visualize things. Now, we're able to visualize things that have occurred to us or how we perceive they might occur. So I can imagine, for example, vaguely a boat on a lake or on the sea, or can imagine an apple falling from a tree, what have you. Now this is part, so the back of our mind is involved with visualization and visual memory, which plays a part in the way memory works. The other part of our brain is the front part of our brain, which helps in terms of conceptualizing so for example, I see that, it's gone, the information has gone to my occipital part of my mind, bear with me, it's gone through the back of my mind, it's then relayed to my frontal cortex, and then my thalamus rather, and then the front part of my mind is where it's working out. I know there's got hot water in there now. Is it too hot still? Am I going to burn myself? Do I want to have some of my Argentinian green tea? So the front of my brain is working with that memory. I remember that I put the hot water in. I know it's there. But the front of my brain is dealing with conceptualizing, evaluating something that we see within us based on a previous event and what may occur in the future. It's called an evaluation. We evaluate, assess, and calculate based on a reward. Is there any reward or benefit? The cost benefit of, for example, me having a sip now. If I have a sip, it's going to interrupt the flow of the podcast. Go, do I care? I don't care. So I'm going to have a sip of this green tea from Argentina. Delicious. Really good stuff. I used to drink that when I was living in Argentina when I was 22 on a great, wonderful, estate, estancia in Argentina. So, if an event is traumatic, it's repeated, it causes us distress, it gets marked by the amygdala, and it then goes into our back of in our unconscious mind, and that is marked. So even further down the road, half a year later, 10 years later, I may not be in that traumatic situation. A dog comes in, it bites me, okay, really hard. A dog comes in, rah, 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 and it bites me, and it goes and leaves. Now I remember that because it was so severe, it really hurt, really bit me. Now I can remember that in it 1 year, 2 years, 3 years. I'll remember that moment. Now, even when the dog is long gone, maybe the dog is dead, it's died, maybe 5 years, 7 years later, but I can still remember that event. And that is when we relive events in our mind. Now that was, for example, a traumatic event to me, relatively speaking. But every time we relive that trauma, we go back, we go to try to fix it, to try to solve it. We're reliving that anxious moment. And this is basically how trauma works. We relive. And even if we're not consciously aware that we're reliving, it's festering within our subconscious, because we've stored it as a long-term memory. The hippocampus has stored it as a long-term memory. Even when the dog is dead, you can still relive that. I know someone that as a young girl, was bitten by a bird, and that was a traumatic event for her, and she developed a fear of birds growing up. And this is where we use the word phobia. She had a phobia. Phobia is the Greek word which means fear. As you know, a lot of science words have funny Greek sounding, or are from the Greek, indeed. So this is called ornithophobia. Ornis, it means bird in Greek. Ornithophobia. Now, that dog I mentioned that bit me, I was actually bitten there once when I was like 13, badly by a dog, but that was partly my fault, so I'm not worried. But a fear of dog is called a cynophobia, from sinus, which is the Greek word for dog. And you have claustrophobia, fear of being enclosed in something. Agoraphobia is a fear of open spaces or being in an environment that you can't control. Not necessarily just a wide open field or a wide open river, but being in a place that you feel you can't control, you feel out of place, a place that you don't want to be. It's called agoraphobia. Now, phobias are caused by objects. There's no blame specifically to the dog, the bird, in ornithophobia or claustrophobia, or there are plenty of other phobias. And there is no blame, bear with me. Now, the opposite of phobia is a philia. the word to be a Francophile means someone that loves French people, an Anglophile, but there's also, you can have someone that loves dogs, is called a Sinophile. So it's not just phobias, there are also things that we can do where we love things we love. It's not just a negative thing, but we are dealing with anxiety, stress and trauma, so we're tending to focus on the phobias. But do remember, the opposite of a phobia is a philia, where you love something. So if I love open spaces, I love being out and in a large environment, we call it, agoraphilia. Not what is twisted into a sexually perverted meaning of it, which you often find today, but a love of open spaces, a love of birds. But phobias are to do with certain things, basically. The phobias are when we develop in our long-term memory a system where we are recalling those memories. Just quickly, paranoia. Para means beyond or outside of, and noia means nous. It comes from the word nous, which in Greek means mind. So paranoia is something beyond our mind, Paranoia relates to people, usually, rather than phobias relate to objects or animals. Paranoia is when we develop suspicion of something, an unrealistic fear that something is going to occur, when the probability of it occurring is 1 in a million. Paranoia, we develop suspicion, we develop an apathy towards someone, a kind of lingering, festering discomfort and hate to someone, which may or not be true, but it's called a paranoia. It develops in our mind. You develop a distrust for someone. You develop a suspicion of someone. Become paranoid about it. The paranoid can also, you may have reason to be distrustful of someone. You may have reason to dislike them. You may have suspicion that they stole something for you, they cheated you, or they don't even love you. This is all paranoia. Paranoia is when there can be blame attached to someone else relating to other people, whereas phobias relate to specific things. A fear of spiders would be arachnophobia. A love of spiders is arachnophilia. So there is a loving side as well, but we're here talking about the negative. You go, well, I have these recurring bad memories. They bring me up, cause of anxiety, stress, and they're unfulfilled memories. So, as you know, our bodies have something called homeostasis, the ability to reset itself and rebalance itself. And indeed, memories, we also have this homeostatic ability to recalibrate our memory. And how? Well, this ability to adjust our memories occurs in something called the hippocampus. The hypothalamus. Hippocampus was what I mentioned earlier on about short and long-term memory and navigation and, and those kind of experiences and spatial memory. So the hypothalamia is a part of your brain which sits below the thalamus, and this is where we can adjust those memories that have been stored or things we remind to when we need to. But don't forget, it's good to have memory of certain things. If a dog came in here and bit me, well, okay, I could say, I remember that. Okay, well, I need to close the door or put a metal sock on my leg. I'm being stupid. But memory can also help us to defend ourselves, protect ourselves against something happened again. The old English expression, once bitten, twice shy, meaning that once a dog has bit me once, I'll be twice shy, means I will be twice cautious about avoiding being bitten by the dog again, you see. once bitten, twice shy, refers to the memory that you're a memory of being bitten, and twice you'll be less reluctant to go and pat the dog or be near the dog or to put yourself exposed to be bitten by the dog. But the hypothalamus allows us to readjust it. So how? We need to confront those bad memories, bring them up, no matter how uncomfortable those memories are, and try to realize that they're not happening in the present moment. The threat is probably no longer here. The bad experience is no longer around. And we now need to replace those bad memories with good memories. We need to face the memory, breathe in and exhale, associate with good things in our life, and every day realize that the more we engage in good things with courage, patience, honesty, the ability to not become too over traumatized or react to certain things around, to be magnanimous, the more we're able to treat life in moderation, to be less extreme with our activities, to be provident, to foresee things that may occur, to avoid bad things happening to take evasive action. All these virtues and all the things that we can manifest good when we're recording these bad memories to say now things can be different will help us at night to reset those bad memories. And when we go to sleep, the short-term memory of us confronting the experience and understanding the experience and understanding how the brain works will allow us then, when we sleep, that new short-term memory will then be able to go back into a longer-term memory in the hippocampus, and the red marker on the bad memory will turn off that red marker. If you like, you turn that red marker into a blue marker. Blue marker means it's no longer a threat. So you need to engage in those bad memories, even if you sweat, if you panic, bereave. Have faith that you are a special person. The universe is an amazing place. And I always say, if you are able to think beyond yourself or let yourself go and to relate to a higher force, whether the universe, God, Jesus or Buddha or the Hindu faiths, Muhammad or Mother Earth, Gaia, if you're able to transcend yourself. So it's really unpleasant to relive and have bad experiences, things that burn in the back of our mind. But if you're able to take action and face it and say, I've had enough, I no longer suffer with these bad memories. I believe in God, I believe in Buddha, I believe in Mother Earth. I love myself so much. It's an amazing, beautiful miracle of life that I'm in. I will not become a victim of a bad experience or someone else. I will begin again. I have the power to renew myself with, and then I am a Christian, but I'm not here to soliloquize, I'm not here to preach. Okay, so I'm not going to do that, but to face those bad memories and to reset those memories. We can do that. Remember, we have homeostasis, which means we can restabilize things, our illnesses and parts of the body as much as we can. Of course, remember, mentally handicapped is where we are not able to personally fix ourselves, to deal with anxiety, trauma, nervous anxiety. We're mentally handicapped. It's a different thing. But mental disorders are something that we're talking about, where we can understand and learn how to recalibrate, remodify, re-engage the memories, so we're no longer a victim of those memories and we're not reliving those memories. Now, just quickly, I know we're coming to an end. The girl that got bitten by the bird, she spent 30 years being afraid of birds. She went to a hypnotist. She didn't listen to my podcast on how memory works, how we process memory. The last thing I'll mention is that we have what's called implicit memory, which run automatically in the background, and we also have explicit memory. What I mean by explicit memory? Well, explicit memory is when we can recall, revisualize, and engage and think and reevaluate experiences and memories, or to relive good memories, or to bring out memories. Explicit memories, we consciously choose to bring those memories to the fore and out. It's a good therapy, but also if they're good memories, let's bring out the best of the memories that we have, whilst not forgetting to live for today, the now and tomorrow. Explicit memory. I'd like you, if you could, to get your mobile phone when you have a free moment and just type in this for me. Explicit memory, what is it? Thalamus and memory, or thalamus and memory, how does it work? Hippocampus and memory, how does it work? And hypothalamus, how does it work? Hippocampus, how does it work? Hypothalamus, how does it work? And thalamus, how does it work? And you'll be able to slowly produce the short-term episodic event by looking into these ideas, and then every day they'll sink into your unconscious mind, your long-term memory, and you'll be able to heal yourself just by the very process of working with the whole idea of memory and how it works. Remember, the more we engage in the good, the less we engage in the bad. The more we engage in virtuous activity, we're going to create waves of positive energy. And the more we engage in vice, i.e. the opposite of virtue is a vice, the more we get entwined within vices, the more we're going to drag ourselves down. None of us are perfect. We all have some degree of imperfection. But when we feed off negative energy, we enjoy the vice, or we don't take ourselves away from vice, i.e. bad things, we're never going to be able to reset our subconscious or our impersonal mind so that we project good health, we project happiness, we project positivity. Have courage to confront bad memories, and I hope that you've listened and maybe benefited from this podcast. But the mind and memory work in very curious ways. I'm going to leave you, before I go, with this, which imagine different parts of the memory, different anatomy, different parts of the brain are concerned with different memory. So the occipital lobe in the back is called visualizations and visual memories, to visualize and record events. The thalamus is concerned with processing sensory input from touch, sight, and sound, and smell, or not smell. And then we have the hippocampus, which is involved with processing short and long-term memory, retrieving memories, and also involved with navigation, getting to the shops, and orientation. And then we have the front part of your mind, the frontal cortex, the prefrontal cortex, which is involved with evaluating the benefit and the risk of using a memory. I remember the hot water's in there. Has it cold now? Is it now cold enough to drink? Well, okay, well, I'll have a sip. You see, so the frontal part of the mind is involved with working with the memories and making evaluations on recent memories, short-term memories. And then we have the all-important